Hi, I'm author Camille DeMaio, and I'm here in my continuing series where I talk to lots of people in the book world. I'm talking to authors as well, but we are the ones who get to have our name on the title of the book, and yet we know very well that there are so many people who have a lot to do with bringing that book to fruition. In my personal opinion, I think there is nobody more important in the publishing process beside the author than the developmental editor. And I have been so fortunate on 4 of my 5 books to work with the highly sought after Tiffany Yates Martin on my developmental edit process. And I've said it over and over and mean it so sincerely that she has done so much work on my books that I think her name should be on the title cover just as well. Since I can't do that, I can at least introduce you to her. And also, she is about, 5 weeks ago, she published her first editing book called Intuitive Editing, and it's phenomenal. And it is a great way to get access to all of Tiffany's wisdom. So I'm going to make sure she shows you that cover so you can run out there and buy it, which is the best favor you can do to yourself as an author. But anyway, so this is Tiffany, and Tiffany, can you introduce yourself and just kind of give us a definition as to what developmental editing is?
Sure. Tiffany, that was like an incredibly generous introduction. I don't know how I can top that, but developmental editing is the process of working directly with authors to help them mine out what the soul of the story is. Like, I always liken it to holding up a mirror to show the author what they actually have on the page, because generally you've done all this work and you know the whole world is inside of your head and you're filling in all of the blanks, but it's the disconnect is that you are so close to it and you're filling in the blanks that it's hard to see sometimes how much of that is evident to the reader and how much of that you're just filling in because you know it. So the editor is kind of, I guess, the bridge, the bridge between your brain and the page there.
Probably the not seeing the forest for the trees is probably a pretty good, an apt analogy here. We are very, very close to it, and it takes somebody else. We just can't sit back and look at it dispassionately, and that's really great. Now, as we've edited all of this, I wanted to kind of describe for people on the author end of this is not about somebody coming in and telling you what to do. This is not somebody rewriting what you've done. By the time you finish your book, they're 100% your words. All it is, and Tiffany has a really great style with this, she asks you a lot of questions. And the questions are, and they're lovingly said, like, how would she do this? Or something like that. Or what would she feel about this? Which I think is code for saying, I'm not really getting the emotion. But Tiffany says it in a way that just makes you think deeper. And so I think a lot of what you do is questions which just make me think. But in the end, it's still my creative words coming out on the page. I don't think I understood that as a reader before being an author. I really thought an editor went in and like fixed things, and that's not at all what it is.
Well, it's that mean red pencil image that a lot of authors have, which is they come in and they savage your words. And there are editors who do that. There's bad editing. But I don't, to me, it's really important that the editor be respectful of the author as a person, and also the author's vision and the author's voice, because all of that is what makes the story your story. And the truth is, we don't exist without authors. I mean, I've heard authors tell me stories about editors who tell them, this is worthless, you should put it in a drawer, or take a high-handed attitude. And I mean, we have experience in the market, and we have experience with crafts, so we can help you make sure that you're expressing your story in the way that is most effective on the page. But anybody who comes in and tells you how to tell your story, isn't that famous Neil Gaiman quote? If people tell you, something that's wrong with your story, they're probably right. If they tell you how to fix it, they're probably wrong. Oh. So it's up to you. I mean, I'm paraphrasing terribly, but it's up to you to know how to do it. But a good editor shines the light in all the corners so that you know what might benefit from more attention.
And maybe a good way to illustrate it as well is that I have actually read a whole lot of books that you have edited. And I either know going in that you've edited them, or I read the acknowledgments, I go, oh, Tiffany edited this. And what's great is I can't pinpoint something and read it and say, oh, I see Tiffany's hand in this. It's almost like you're a ghost.
That's exactly what a good edit should be. Totally invisible.
the only stamp that can make me say this is, Tiffany had a hand in it, is that it's quality. And so, that obviously has something to do with the author, but what you help pull from them is a lot of quality, but that's because your voice is not in it. And so anybody thinking about, writing and what editing might mean, I just want to assure them a good editor is going to pull out your voice so that you never do see the editor's stamp on that, other than the fact that it's good.
It's almost like a personal trainer. You know what I mean? Like they're not, or I always say it's like a midwife. I didn't make the baby. I'm not going to keep the baby, but I can help you bring that baby out into the world.
Yes. Yeah, I like that too. Been through that one a few times myself.
Just a few.
The book baby analogy is very analogous, very rightfully analogous. So Tiffany, I'm imagining in your long career, you have probably edited hundreds of thousands of books.
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds or thousands, maybe not hundreds, hundreds or thousands. We just hope you live a long time to be able to do that. What are some of the common pitfalls that you see authors making that just right from the start, they can be looking for that in their work?
I think the place to start is generally with character, because I think it's the foundation of story. And so a lot of times you'll have a great idea for like who your character is and they live in your head. But again, it's that disconnect between have you actually put it on the page? So the first chapter in the book is character. And I ask 1 million of those questions you love so much that are designed to help you figure out, so when I first started working in this industry, I used to read, I love craft books like all of us. And I used to read craft books that would say things like, you should know exactly what your character's favorite color is and what they love to eat for breakfast in 3rd grade. And I'm like, okay, great. But then what? Like, what do you do with that information? And so I think the trick is, yes, you have to know your character that well. So they really are real and fully fleshed, and they have histories and lives beyond the world of the story that you're telling, but also be able to present that in a way where you know which parts of that are directly germane for the character's journey, and how to, I think I've said to you before, how to weave that in as context so that you don't bog down the story with like info dumps or flashbacks, but you're giving that perspective of history and context while you're continuing to move the story forward. So that's a really long way of saying character is the number one thing. If you work on nothing else in your story, get your characters really well developed.
Well, the best thing you've taught me about character is the question of what is she feeling? Because most of my protagonists are female. So what is she feeling here? And the first
Let us in.
Oh, yes. The first time we edited a book together, which was Before the Rain Falls, I can't even count how many times, but what is she feeling was in there. Clearly, that was my weak point. And on all of my subsequent manuscripts, I cannot write even a first draft without, but what is she feeling in my head? So I really believe that working with you, especially on that first time we worked on Before the Rain Falls together, was the very best writing education I could have gotten. It's better than any creative writing class I've taken or anything like that. Not only the quality of your work, but when it's all focused on your one book instead of being generic, that's pretty good education right there.
Right. It's a masterclass in your story, basically.
I've also seen over working through several books with you that sometimes the role of an editor is that you see what's there that the author may not even be seeing. You've pulled out in some of my books thematic things that I wasn't consciously putting on the page, but you've seen them from this, bigger, outside step. Most recently, when you read over the first Emma for me, which is my most recent book, you're the one who pointed out that I had these two characters. One was a motherless child and one was a childless woman. And I could have told you that factually if I was listing these things about my characters, but you pulled out this thing that I had written that I didn't even really make the connection of, wow. So on my next round of edits with that, I amped it up. I said, I've got a motherless child and a motherless young girl, and I've got a woman who was never able to have children, and I formed this friendship, but now I get to take it to this other level. So I think that's something that you do very well too. Is you can see what's there even if I don't see what's there.
Well, it's that drone view, and that's one of my favorite things actually in editing, is to see, because when you're writing, I do think most writers have that. It's amazing to me how much from the writer's subconscious finds its way onto the page. but maybe not yet. If the writer's not yet aware of it, it's not done deliberately enough so that it's really evident to the reader. And it's stuff exactly like that. Like you had that theme in there, but I don't think you realized that it was a really powerful sub theme running through. But as soon as you see it, it's Waldo, right? You're like, oh my God, of course.
I can just make it.
But you put it there. That's the funny part. Like you put it there. I just went, oh, by the way.
I have definitely come to realize how much the subconscious is working. Oh my gosh, I would not have thought that, but 5 books in, you point things out and I go, oh my gosh, I did put that in there. So,
and you know what's really helpful with stuff like that? I've started recommending this. On my website, I have a whole page of resources. And of course, it's a lot of craft books and podcasts and blogs all about writing, or trying to get an agent or published or any of that. But I started recommending psychology books because I realized how much of this is really profoundly based in who human beings are and why we do what we do. And the more clearly you have that understanding, I think the easier it is to access stuff like that. Like what would that feel like to these 2 women together whose I guess biggest gap inside of them is perfectly aligned with the other person. Like what does that hit on psychologically?
Oh, that's a great idea. I never took psychology in college. It probably would have done me a lot.
You didn't? I'm surprised.
What is she feeling out there? I probably could have avoided.
Writers tend to gravitate toward it because of that, I think, because isn't that why we write? We want to know what makes people tick.
I write because I find really cool historical things that I want to tell people. And I think that's why I have to use all these what is she feeling kind of things, because I'm just excited to share information. Maybe I should be writing nonfiction, but
because you bring history to life. That's what I love about your books, is through the lens. It's so much easier for us to understand anything large and generalized through the specifics. And actually, I talk about that with editing all the time. The more specific you can be in your story, the more universal it will feel to other people. And that's what you do. You take these, if you had come up to anybody you know and said, let me tell you all about the first woman brewer during Prohibition, they'd probably like glaze over and go, I got to get a drink.
Yeah.
But you make us know Emma. You make us know the people in here, and now we invest in them. And that's, you asked about like common errors writers make. We don't care what's happening until we care who it's happening to. So now you made us care who it's happening to. And now we want to know all about that world.
That's awesome. I'm going to remember that.
But if you asked me before I read your book, do you want to know about San Antonio during Prohibition and a woman who brewed, I'd be like, no, that's kind of a cool fact, but that's cool.
I do love that about historical fiction. Is there any genre that you prefer or disprefer to edit?
I do. So every editor specializes, or every good editor specializes. I don't do stuff like horror, although I have done horror, but I am a big baby and I have nightmares. So I used to work with Anya Alborn, who writes just absolutely terrifying horror, and I loved working with her. But I didn't do more of that because I stopped sleeping. Yes. I don't do a lot of YA or middle grade, and I've just started reading it, and it's wonderful. And I kind of have a little editor envy because I want to work in it, but I feel like I'd need to understand the genre a lot better. And then I do a lot of women's fiction, suspense, thriller, mystery. I have done a lot of romance in the past. I don't do so much anymore. General fiction. I love story, like all of us, right? I love, mostly I'm a character editor, so I'm also a character reader. And you and I have talked about how you analyze the things you watch and read. I find that even the stuff I gravitate to as a lay reader or viewer is really character heavy.
Yeah.
I love knowing, like, who are we? Why do we do what we do?
Well, you brought up movies, and that's something I wanted to be sure to tell people too, that something that's been very effective in your editing for me is that many times when there is something you're trying to help me evoke from the characters, usually an emotion, or maybe there's a similar situation, you will often recommend a movie for me to watch that evokes that kind of thing. And so then when I go back to rewrite, I've been encompassed by this movie and I have all the feels and I can put it back on the page. And you've done that several several times and it's been so very helpful. And what's nice is, you know, a movie might be 2 hours, so it's not a huge commitment for me to say, okay, I can go watch that movie and feel what I need to feel. Do you find that there's any particular movies you're recommending more than others?
You know, it depends what I'm watching or reading at the time that I am needing a reference. When I was an actor, they used to tell you you need to keep yourself visible because they will call the person who's foremost in their mind. And that is true every time. And it's true for me. Like if you ask me about stakes right now, I'd go, oh, Ozark, because that's the most recent thing I watched that made me really invest in the stakes and observe like how the storytellers raised them. So Ozark is probably the best storytelling on television, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. Stakes, character development, suspense and tension. Oh my God. But what I love about the way they complicate the stakes is that, you know how they always tell you get your character in a tree and throw rocks at them?
Yeah.
But you get them into a dead end and then you kind of like figure your way out. But I think especially as storytellers, we are very good at figuring the way out. So I don't know, do you watch stuff and like try to guess the end?
Oh, always, always.
Yeah.
And I find that the more I write, I actually am more accurate about guessing how it might end, because I do start to watch things and go, how would I resolve this as a writer?
Yes.
Knowing
So do you like it when you can figure out the end? Do you like it?
I do. I like it when I figured it out because of a writing tool that
Yes.
something very specific to craft, not like, oh, it's just a gut feeling of how it's going to end. I think that is why, just slight diversion, my very, very favorite author is Agatha Christie. And the reason is I've read all of her Poirot books and I have never, ever guessed who did it. Ever. Because
so that's what I was going to say. As much as I love being able to guess the ending, because I'm like, I guessed it.
I know, it's like,
or I figured it out. I'm a little disappointed, you know, because don't we read and watch to be surprised? And so if somebody, so you, as you're saying, you're a storyteller. So you know, it's almost like you see behind the curtain. So you can generally puzzle a lot of it out when even you can't. When even I can't, when that's what I do for a living, I am delighted with that. And Ozark does that so well.
I'm gonna have to watch that because my ego wants to feel like, I got that right. But I'll have to watch it with Ozark with that in mind. And that's
it's dark.
Watch.
It's dark. You'll need a palate cleanser afterward.
Well, we usually end our evenings with a Seinfeld or an Office episode, no matter whatever we've watched, and especially if we watched a dark movie. I'm reading the book right now about the making of The Office. Total side subject, but that is a hoot.
Oh, fun! I love stuff like that. Making ofs are fascinating to me. Back when DVDs first came out, that was all the extra features. I was all about that.
Oh, I thought that was it. I thought we were never going to get better technology than having extra features on the TV.
Next up, we're going to be in the movie with holographs around us.
I'm there for that. I love that. So going back to the editing process now, is there anything you want to ask me from what an author's perspective is working together or doing this, so we can kind of round out what the experience is like for somebody? Yeah,
I actually think that's almost more pertinent to other writers, is knowing how you as a writer handle, when you and I work together, it's a bunch of feedback. It's, you use my favorite phrase, the literary root canal. And for your viewers who may not know, we're talking editorial letters of anywhere from 7,000 words to 10,000 words, maybe?
I count them by pages, but I think on 3 of my 4 books, your editorial letters to me have been 10 pages. And it's so consistent that I thought that you were aiming for 10 pages because it's like that. Probably
I don't know how to shut up.
I was like, oh, she has 10 pages to be able to tell me something, but no, so maybe that's just how much work I need. Single spaced, by the way, also doesn't include everything in the margin. So that's where I coined the literary root canal, because it feels like that. Then there was one book, I think it was The Beautiful Strangers. And I got my letter back from you and it was 5 pages long. And I went, hallelujah, I am becoming a better writer, because Tiffany's editorial letter to me was only 5 pages long. So I felt like I had just hit the jackpot. So we went through that round of edits. And then on the second round of edits, you sent me a brand new 5-page editorial letter. So in total, I ended up having 10 pages again.
Just split it up just for fun.
I
But that's a ton of feedback, and that's not all you're getting. Like you said, you also, so that's the big picture stuff. And then you have all those embedded notes, which are the specific stuff. That is a metric ton of input. I am always curious how you take, well, first of all, how you take that. Like that comes in and it's like this fire hose of information. So how do you process that as a writer? And then how do you figure out how to take, how to figure out which of the suggestions feel right for your story and incorporate them? How do you even begin to do that?
Well, my process is that the second it appears on my phone, I could be at the grocery store. If my editorial letter has come in, I am going to stop anything I'm doing because I have zero patience to wait and find out. So I will literally stop anywhere I am and I will read all 10 pages and dissect that. And sometimes I'll even open the document and start reading the margin notes too.
Oh my God.
So the first time you do that, and I find this to be true of a lot of authors, is it's a bit of a gut punch, and not because you've been loving and supportive and everything, but it's deep, and that's tough because it requires you to go deeper. And so I have to, after digesting that, I have to let it go for about 24 hours. Kind of kicking and screaming a little bit like, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I would never think of that. No, I would never go down that road. And 24 hours later, I guarantee I'm going, wow, she's a genius. So it's about a 24-hour process. And then my actual, how do I logistically dive in and do that? For me, I try to do all the easy stuff first. So I will get into the line edits at the end where sometimes it's just, do you have a better word here? Or just all the stuff, because in a line edit, there's all sorts of things in the margins. So I feel like the more I can clear those out, I feel like the job at hand is not as overwhelming. I'm tricking myself because the really hard work is the other stuff. But if visually I can feel like I've cleared the page a whole bunch, then I feel like I've accomplished something and I don't have as far to go with it. So that's just my own personal process. And so then after all of the little piddly stuff is out of the way, I'm ready to really take a look at that deep dive. Thankfully, on a multi-round edit, there's deadlines, and I am awesome with deadlines. If I'm only accountable to myself, forget it. But if I'm accountable to somebody else, I'm going to get that done. And it really pushes me to prioritize it. My family doesn't like me very much when I'm editing. And I found that this is true across the board for authors, because we have to become hyper-focused in the editing process. You have to just inhabit not only the world you created, but the world that the editor is inviting you to see in an even better way. And you cannot be distracted. I've got 4 kids and a husband, and we homeschool and we all work from home, and I have to just shut down. So I get to warn them, I'm editing for this month. Don't expect me.
That's funny. It is deeper than writing, I think. It's the fine work.
It is, but I will say that I love that. I don't know if this is universal or not, but I love the editing process. As much as I feel like I sound like I've just dissed it, it's actually not true. The writing part to me is just about getting to the end. I want to feel like, okay, I've got the draft done. But the real beauty and potential brilliance of a book, I think, comes out in that editing process. It's where you're fine-tuning. And that's what is the difference between a draft and a final product, really, is the fine-tuning. So I think the editing is where the magic happens.
So how much of your editing process happens with actual work and writing, and how much of it is that kind of processing work? Because a lot of the stuff that we'll talk about will be intentions or motivations or reworking perhaps a character's trajectory. And it's not stuff that you can just go, oh, okay, and dive right back in. Do you have to kind of sit and reimagine some things?
I do, but I don't really spend all that long with it. In every aspect of my life, I'm way more of a doer than I am a thinker. Like if I need to paint a room, I absolutely detest laying the blue tape down. It is nothing but a waste of time. I just want to get to the work. As much as I know that it's smart, it irritates me to death because I just want to dive in. So for those bigger picture conceptual things where it's not just a word change or something, I do sit and think about it first. maybe a couple of hours. But if you're willing as an author to embrace the brilliance of what's just been presented to you, you have a roadmap. I don't really think that so my style is not to go spend days and days ruminating on it, because I've got that deadline out there and I'm going to meet that deadline. So really, maybe a couple hours tops.
Wow. And do you start at the beginning and go through, or do you like sort of dive in situationally working on certain things?
It depends on the issue. So if I know that something has been suggested and I know exactly what I'm going to do with it, I go get that done. Because once again, to me, it's like check, 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 got that done. I really keep the harder stuff for the end, because I think as the couple weeks go by between the edits, I'm getting progressive things done by checking the list of the things I know how to do that I'm going to go do it. But in the back of my mind, I am thinking, I am addressing in my head the bigger things. And so at the very end, I will attack the bigger things. So that's my process. I don't know
how do you decide? You and I have talked before about, I guess, the darlings, and I always encourage authors, those things, like you said, the whole letter kind of hits you like, get out of my face, I'm not doing any of that. But then I think after the other stuff kind of sinks in and an author goes, yeah, I can see that maybe, or yes, this is close to my intention. There's still those things that are the darlings that, you have to decide whether, because some darlings should be killed and some darlings should be preserved. And an editor is not the arbiter of which is which. You are. So how do you decide what is a darling worthy of life and what is a darling worthy of murder?
Such power. The best example for me is the book we worked on, which is my second book, but our first together, called Before the Rain Falls. And in your editorial letter, you kindly suggested that I kill off 5 different people. And I don't mean kill off like kill them off. I mean like eliminate.
Soften that.
They're never in the book in the first place. And that was excruciating to hear, especially because there's one that his name was Cal. And I just Cal. Loved writing Cal. I had he was a prisoner in Huntsville, but just this guy with his heart. And I loved writing him. But you really showed some ways in your letter why he detracted from what the main heart of the story was. And I had to sit on that one for a while and realize, though, that holding on to him was just because I loved writing him. But I really had to agree he doesn't propel the story. And if you want to keep the pace going, maybe someday I'll write a novella and I'll tell Cal's story. But for now, he doesn't exist on the page. So for the other thing, because you don't just say, hey, get rid of these people. No, first of all, it's a suggestion, not a dictate. But second of all, you give the why. And another powerful why for me was, if a named character isn't really part of essential to the fabric of the story, what if you take them out, but you take the action that they did and you give it to a character who is essential for the story? Then you've no longer cluttered it, and you have elevated that character who's already in there. And so when you showed me that, it literally, every time I name a character now, that's the filter I put them through. And that helped me take out this random character I have who does something near the end of Before the Rain Falls, and I assigned her little action to another minor character that ended up becoming quite elevated because of that. So, and then one character I fought for, and you said, okay, but if you're going to keep her in, she really needs to have stronger purpose.
That was, what was her name? Not Maribel. What was it?
Mercedes.
Mercedes.
Yes. And so I fought to keep Mercedes in. She was the sister of my main character, but I definitely learned from you that if I was going to keep her in, she needed to earn her keep in the story. She needed to have a much more powerful arc than what I was creating. So yeah, that's my process with those, is I now really decide what is their place in this story. I have a character on my current manuscript right now. I'm about 20,000 words in, and I already know which character I'm going to go in and just eliminate, because I have not been able to sustain her story past the first little mention of her name. And I'm like, she's got to go. So she'll be killed later. It will be bloodless. I will just.
That's the hard part. I say in my book, I have broken my own heart so many times. I loved Cal. I loved Mercedes when I was suggesting you kill her off, and then you made her essential. So it
Yes.
worked perfectly. But I love it when you or any author I work with says, I mean, we both consider, okay, well, let me think about what you're saying. Well, you and I have worked together a lot. So you know that my process is when we work together in 3 passes, I will, if I feel really strongly, I'll push twice. And then the third time I'm like, okay, it's your story. And I think you did that too. Like with Cal, I think you pushed twice. You were like, no, I love him. He's going to be in there. I love that, that you know what's best for your story. Like bottom line, you know what's best for your story, but you're also willing to look at a perspective that might be hard to look at and really consider whether that serves your vision, I guess. That's a hard skill.
It is a hard skill, and I learned that early on in life. I come from a very artistic family, mostly hobbyists. We do a lot of creative things on the side. Although I'm going to just total digression of a family brag here. There's 11 first cousins on my side. 10 of us are artistic of one kind or another. We've got dancers, singers, writers.
Wow.
One of them is literally a rocket scientist, and she's in charge of the research.
The underachiever.
Yeah. She was not only a rocket scientist, she was in charge of the recent SpaceX launch, and she was right there on all, helping the astronauts onto there and stuff. So we have our one outlier who just went entirely the opposite direction and people in space. But the rest of us are artistic. And so where that ties in is that I have an uncle who is a cartoonist, and he is a phenomenal cartoonist. Got all the way to the syndicates, and they wanted him, Sunday papers kind of thing. But naturally, even with comics, they wanted edits, and he refused. He was so dogged in his vision for his art that it became unsellable because he wasn't willing to listen to the powers that be that knew how to sell it. And his art never went anywhere. Nobody has seen it because of that. And he was this close. And that has always, I've witnessed that in childhood, and it has carried me all the way through. Is I can either write this and love it and put it on my shelf and feel like I did that nice little project, or I can go out there and actually write a book that will move people and want them to talk about it and want them to buy it for their friends and tell their friends. And if you're going to do that, you have to listen to the powers that be. So there is a huge dose of humility that you have to practice as an author.
That's a hard balance, though, because it is with any art, it's the artist's creation. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to say. I think some writers feel like if anybody else weighs in, it's not really theirs anymore. So I love that you said early in that it is yours. It's completely yours. It's the mirror, it's somebody saying, is this what you intended? Because this is what you're actually showing. But it's a hard thing to do, I think, to take this thing that is so personal and so intimate to who you are, and then, I guess, let someone else in there. And consider that maybe they have a perspective on it that you, the creator, didn't see. That's a tough thing to go, how does that even work? I do think it's the mark, as you said, of the authors who are least willing to entertain any other perspective. I often find our authors who are less experienced or less have not been at the business as long, because it really is a process where I think you need, actors have directors, athletes have coaches. You need someone to say, here's what I'm seeing from out here.
Yes. And I think really in any endeavor in humanity, we are built to have a combination of confidence and humility. And either one in an extreme is not going to get us to where we need to go. We have to have a lot of confidence while we're writing. And then we have to have a lot of humility, I think, when we're editing. So that's where I find the shift, because it goes then from my own personal hobby project to I'm creating a product now. And you have to make that shift. So that's what editing taught me. I had a 5th grade teacher, though, Sister Rose, and in Sister Rose's art class, you would do your art, and then she would take a big, thick black Sharpie, And even for the best artists of the 5th grade class, she would come in there and improve it with her black Sharpie. She'd add shadow and she'd do all these things. And by the time that our 5th grade art was all displayed for the parents to come see, it looked like Sister Rose's work. It didn't look like our work anymore. And that's what I went into this thinking editing was going to be. So I want to say for anybody watching who is a aspiring author who thinks that the editing process is going to make it not be their work, I want to dissuade that from their notion, because Tiffany for sure is no Sister Rose. You don't read a book and say this is Tiffany's work. You say this is the author's work, and Tiffany just helped it glisten.
I made it glisten.
It glistens. It's sparkly now because she asked.
My job is to oil it up, to oil you up as an author.
That's right. It is collaborative. But I will say, to kind of round out where I was going with it, that of all the aspects of publishing and the people that I want to continue to interview, agents and publicists and so forth, my personal opinion is that developmental edit is the most intimate, the most foundational, the most essential part of that entire process. So I will again always say that I would be happy to say this was co-written by Camille and Tiffany, even though you don't write it. Just I feel like the level that you've helped me take my books to has been that elemental to me. So I want to throw that praise your way.
That's very generous. Thank you. It's all you, but that's very generous.
Is there anything I haven't asked Tiffany that you want to make sure that people know?
Oh, that was really good. You're very thorough.
I'm not used to being the interviewer, but I'm working on that. I just want to talk about things I know I'd want to know if I were going into it. Where can they find you though? Because you are highly in demand, but I want to make sure people know where to find you, your resources, and most importantly, your book.
Well, I'm on foxprinteditorial.com, and that's a great clearinghouse for all the above. It's got, I have a whole page of resources for authors. I mentioned earlier, it's got everything from craft books, blogs and podcasts to how to write a query letter, places you can learn about how to submit to agents or what you can expect from publishing. And then it's also got, my book is on there, which is called Intuitive Editing, Creative and Practical Ways to Revise Your Writing. I'm developing some online courses to help authors, do a variety of things, but the first one I'm working on is to help learn to watch and read analytically so that you can hone your storytelling techniques and your editorial brain and bring that to your own writing. And I'm also on Instagram at Tiffany Yates Martin and Twitter and Facebook at FoxPrintEd.
That's wonderful. Well, all of you aspiring authors, or maybe you are seasoned authors who are looking to just make your work even better, I cannot highly recommend enough that you work with Tiffany, or just in general. I'm just going to say we need to all have the humility to say we should have an editor at all. So if you're out in the self-publishing world, I think the number one thing somebody self-publishing can be, go hire a good editor.
A good editor, yes.
Good editor. I believe in it very, very deeply. Well, Tiffany, thank you for spending this time with me. I am about 23,000 words into my next work in progress. And so I can't wait until I kind of have an idea about when I might be able to get you on the schedule, because as much as that 10-page letter makes me go, the fact is, I love it. I love it. I love taking it from draft to final product, and you make it a fantastic process.
Thanks. I love that you love the process.
I do. It's that love-hate thing, but it's really way more love than hate. So, all right. Thanks for joining us today. Go and find Tiffany's book, Intuitive Editing. And if you liked this video and would like to see more like it, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, where I bring you other people from the publishing world. Thank you all. Bye.